I'm 33 and I've been married to my husband, Matt, for nearly 7 years. We've always had a pretty stable relationship. Not exciting, not wild, but solid. We have a small home in a quiet town, no kids, just our 2 cats, and we've both been working from home since the pandemic started. Life had gotten routine, but in a comforting way. At least, that's what I thought. Last Friday, Matt left to visit his parents out of state for the weekend. I stayed behind because I had a work deadline and, truthfully, I needed the house to myself for a bit. I wanted to deep clean, reorganize the pantry, boring but productive stuff. I was halfway through backing up some of my work files when I noticed his external drive was still plugged into the shared office computer. Normally I wouldn't even think twice, but I'd been meaning to upload some old photos from our anniversary trip last year and figured they might be on there. I opened the drive. There was the usual, tax folders, vacation pictures, old work presentations. But then I saw a folder named Reflections. It wasn't hidden, exactly, but it was tucked away inside another folder labeled Miscellaneous 2017. Out of curiosity, I clicked on it. And everything changed. Inside were dozens of subfolders, each labeled with different women's names. Some were generic, like Sarah W. or Emma 2, others more specific, Jen_HR, Michelle_Coffee Shop, Alicia_May 2021. My heart started pounding, but I told myself maybe these were work projects. Maybe he was helping someone organize photos or writing short stories. Matt's always dabbled in creative writing, so it wasn't a crazy stretch. But when I opened the first folder, that hope died fast. Inside were hundreds of screenshots. Mostly from social media. Some looked like they were taken from private accounts. Instagram stories, Facebook posts, random selfies, even Zoom meeting captures. Some of these women looked vaguely familiar, others didn't at all. But what freaked me out the most wasn't just the images. It was the notes. Each folder had a text file with detailed observations. Like, disturbingly detailed. Their favorite drinks, how often they posted about family, whether they wore rings, how frequently they smiled in group photos versus solo shots. One file listed how many times a woman had worn a specific pair of earrings across the past 6 months. Another one described a woman's routine based on gym check-ins and Starbucks tags. I wish I was kidding. I sat frozen for at least 10 minutes, scrolling and reading, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It wasn't illegal, at least, not technically. But it felt wrong. Like something out of a crime documentary. Obsessive. Calculated. So far, nothing was pornographic or directly threatening. But it was deeply personal stuff. Stolen moments. Private data. And my husband had been collecting them. For years. I closed the drive and sat in silence, completely numb. I haven't confronted him yet. Because the worst part? Some of those women. I know them. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of something I couldn't yet name. Fear? Betrayal? Disgust? All I knew was that I couldn't unsee what I had seen. I kept telling myself maybe there was some explanation, some weird research project or a misunderstood hobby, but that hope kept shrinking with every familiar face I remembered. The next morning, I woke up groggy and went straight back to the office. I opened the folder again, this time with a plan. I needed to know who these women were. I started going through the files, one by one, and matched what I could against names on Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn. That's when I realized I wasn't just looking at strangers. The first name I recognized, Jen_HR, hit me like a punch to the gut. Jen worked in HR at my old job. We'd gone out for drinks a few times, nothing major, but she was part of my life. I hadn't worked there in 4 years. How would Matt have even known about her? Then there was Alicia_May 2021. She was my yoga instructor. I stopped going to her classes after we moved, but she still popped up on my Instagram now and then. I had never introduced her to Matt. But there she was, dozens of pictures, including one of her locking her bike outside the studio, and another where she was leaving a grocery store. That one looked like it had been taken from inside a car. I wanted to throw up. By the time I reached the folder labeled Emily_Grocery Cafe, I was shaking. Emily was our neighbor's niece. She'd stayed with them for a few weeks last summer and helped walk their dog. I'd had maybe 3 conversations with her total, and one of them was literally about almond milk. That's it. She was 19. There were photos of her too. Sitting in the backyard. Walking the dog. One of her bending over to tie her shoe. The angles weren't obscene, but they weren't normal either. They were watching angles. Like someone pretending not to look while secretly studying every move. There was a pattern to all of it. The women were never repeated. Each folder stopped after a few weeks or months. Notes would end abruptly. Sometimes with a single line, too distant. Not suitable. Or detached. Avoid. Like he was keeping score. Measuring something. I started taking screenshots. I didn't know what I'd do with them yet, but I knew I couldn't just close the folder and pretend it didn't happen. Then I opened a folder labeled unsure_3. That's when I saw my sister. 3 blurry photos. One of her arriving at our house for Thanksgiving. One of her from behind while she was cooking. And one of her hugging me goodbye in the driveway. The notes were short, thank God, but they were there. Observations about her laugh. The clothes she wore. Her smile. I couldn't even finish reading them. I closed the drive and backed away from the desk. My legs were shaking. This wasn't just some creepy habit. This was something else. And for the first time since opening that folder, I let the question settle fully in my mind. Who the hell did I marry? By Sunday night, I was a wreck. I hadn't eaten a real meal in nearly 2 days. Every time I walked past a window, I felt like someone was watching me. I kept checking the locks, even though I was the only one home, and I started leaving the lights on in every room. But the worst part? I still hadn't figured out what to do. I couldn't confront Matt yet. Not without a plan. Not without knowing the full picture. So I kept digging. That's when I noticed a document tucked away in the deepest part of the reflections folder. It wasn't like the others, it wasn't named after a person. It was just a plain file called log.txt. I opened it. It wasn't a journal. It wasn't a story. It was a list, 57 entries. Each numbered. Each with a woman's name, location, and a status. The first few entries were labeled things like observation started or routine mapped. Others said disengaged or not viable. I kept scrolling. And then, near the middle, I saw one labeled engagement, success, ongoing. Next to that one? My name. I couldn't breathe. The log had dates going back almost 9 years. 2 full years before we even started dating. He had listed when he first noticed me, apparently at a local bookstore where I used to hang out on weekends. I had no idea. According to the notes, he'd seen me there 3 separate times before we ever met at that friend's birthday party, which I thought was a total coincidence. But it wasn't. He'd planned it. There were more notes. Detailed breakdowns of my personality traits, patterns in my work schedule, how often I saw my sister, even what kind of wine I preferred when I was stressed. Some of the entries were marked with timestamps, like they'd been logged in real time. Like he had been keeping tabs on me daily for months, before he ever said a word to me. The version of Matt I knew, the sweet, quiet guy who loved documentaries and bad coffee, started to disintegrate. In his place, there was someone who saw people as puzzles. Experiments. Someone who stalked me, studied me, and made me fall for him on purpose. Suddenly, memories started flooding back. Things that never stood out before. The time he casually mentioned loving the same obscure author I adored, even though I'd never told him. The way he always knew when I was having a bad day, down to the exact hour. How he once brought up a childhood memory of mine that I swore I hadn't shared yet. I thought it was connection. Now it felt like manipulation. And the rest of the list? I couldn't stop reading. Some of the names had a chilling new label next to them, escalated. No contact. Boundary pushed. Terminated. Triggered suspicion. Abandoned. And 3 had just one word. Resolved. No notes. No explanation. Just that. And now I had to ask myself a question I never thought I'd ask about my own husband. What exactly does resolved mean? I couldn't stop staring at that word. Resolved. It was so vague. So cold. Like an ending that didn't need elaboration. There were 3 of them. 3 women. I copied their names down. I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe it meant they moved away. Maybe he just lost interest. But nothing about the list was casual. Every entry was calculated, methodical. And these 3 were the only ones that didn't include any details, no dates, no notes, just that one final word. I took the names to my laptop and started searching. The first one, Madeline Torres, had an old LinkedIn profile. It hadn't been updated in years. No Instagram. Her Facebook was locked up tight. The only new post I could find was a picture from 2019 that someone else had tagged her in. Comments under it asked where she'd been. Someone else wrote, "Haven't heard from you in forever, hope all is well." There was never a reply. I tried the second name, Erin D. Mackenzie. That one sent me into a tailspin. There were news articles. Obituary-style write-ups. She'd gone missing in 2018. Last seen leaving a gym in another state. Her car was found a few blocks away. No sign of a struggle, no confirmed sightings after that day. The case had gone cold. I scrolled through the article, my hands sweating. Matt and I had taken a trip to that same state in 2018. I remember it because we almost missed our flight back. He'd insisted on going for a late-night walk the night before, even though I was exhausted. I'd said no, and he went alone. When he got back, he smelled like rain and soil. I never thought twice about it. Until now. I felt sick. My vision blurred. I closed the tab and just sat there, holding myself together. I didn't want to check the third name. But I did. Jasmine R. Only an initial for the last name. But even that was enough. I remembered her. We'd crossed paths once at a mutual friend's wedding 5 years ago. She was beautiful, magnetic. The kind of person everyone watched when she entered a room. I remembered thinking she made me feel invisible. Matt had barely spoken to her, or so I thought. Now I wondered if he'd approached her later, followed her, added her to his list. And then? I searched her full name. No obituaries. No missing person cases. But she hadn't posted online in over 3 years. Her last post was a photo of a sunset with the caption "One of those days where everything feels still." No likes. No comments. It just sat there, frozen in time. I shut the laptop and sat on the floor. There was no proof. Not yet. Nothing directly tying him to anything. But I couldn't ignore the feeling in my chest, like something dark had wrapped itself around my ribs and was slowly squeezing. He was due home the next day. And I had no idea if I should be scared of the man I was married to. Or if I already should have been. By the time Matt pulled into the driveway Monday afternoon, I had already scrubbed every trace of my snooping from the computer, cleared the logs, hid the screenshots on a password-protected drive, and tucked it away inside a folder labeled Tax Stuff 2021. He wouldn't go near that. He hated taxes. I'd spent the last 24 hours trying to act normal, prepping my face in the mirror, practicing my voice so it wouldn't shake. I didn't know if I should run or stay, confront or disappear. But one thing was clear, I needed more answers before I made a move. So I smiled when he walked through the door. I hugged him. I even asked about his parents. He kissed my forehead like he always did, and everything about him felt the same. Same worn duffel bag. Same tired jokes. Same way he set his keys in the bowl by the door, without ever looking up. Except now I knew. Now I was watching him through a new lens, and suddenly everything looked staged. Every word felt scripted. Even the way he kicked off his shoes, just a little too perfect. Too practiced. That night, I lay in bed with his arm draped over me and my mind racing. I kept imagining that folder. The names. The word resolved pulsing in the dark like it was stitched into my skull. But then something happened. Around 3 a.m., I heard his phone buzz on the nightstand. He didn't move. He always slept like a rock after travel. I waited a minute, then reached for it as quietly as I could. His phone had a lock, but I knew the code, his birthday. I held my breath as I opened his messages. There weren't many. Mostly spam or coworkers. But one name stood out. Unknown number. No contact saved. Just a thread with a handful of messages. The last one was from 2 nights ago. Still watching. You know what happens if you stop. My chest went tight. I scrolled up. Another message, sent a few days earlier. You're slipping. She's asking questions. And before that, don't forget what you owe. Finish the list. I wanted to scream. Or run. Or wake him up and demand answers. But I didn't do any of those things. I locked his phone, slid it back into place, and curled up under the covers. Whoever that was, they weren't just a friend. Matt was being watched too. And if what I was reading was real, maybe he wasn't in control of all this after all. Which meant someone else might be. I didn't sleep at all after that. Just stared into the darkness, listening to Matt breathe, wondering if the man beside me was scared too, and what he was scared of. Because the texts weren't from a fan, or a friend, or some creepy bot. They were orders. Threats. And Matt, the one who'd always seemed so precise, so in control, suddenly looked like a man taking instructions. The next morning, I acted normal. Made coffee, asked about his parents again, mentioned a fake client meeting I had later that day. I needed him to leave the house. I needed more time. More privacy. Because now I didn't just want to know what Matt had done, I wanted to know who else was involved. Around 11 a.m., he said he was going to run errands. I watched him pull out of the driveway, waited 5 minutes, then grabbed his phone from the charger. I had no idea how long he'd be gone, so I moved fast. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I started with his call logs. A lot of them were just regular contacts. But there was one number that came up often, unsaved, just like the one from the message thread. I copied it down. Then I found something strange in his Notes app. A file labeled Loyalty Program. I almost laughed at the name. But when I opened it, my blood went cold. It was a table. Just a basic list. 10 rows. Each with a first name, a status, a location. The first few names I recognized from the folder on his drive. Alicia. Jen. Emily. The fifth name? Aaron D. Mackenzie. Status, resolved. But there was a second column I hadn't seen before. This one was titled, Passenger ID. Next to each name was a strange combination of letters and numbers. Like some kind of code. Almost like tracking numbers, or maybe usernames. Each one was different, except for the very last row. That one just said, TBD, submission pending. And next to it? My name. My throat closed up. I didn't know what passenger ID meant, or what the hell submission pending was supposed to imply, but every instinct in my body told me one thing. This wasn't over. Not even close. I backed out of the note, shaking, and then something happened that made me drop the phone entirely. A notification popped up at the top of the screen. A new message from the same unknown number. You have 48 hours left. Do not disappoint us. I stared at the message like it was burning through the screen. You have 48 hours left. Do not disappoint us. I wasn't even supposed to see that. Whoever they were, they thought I was him. Matt. Which meant I had 2 days before something happened. To him? To me? To someone else? I copied the message, forwarded it to myself, and deleted the notification from his phone. Then I slipped it back exactly where it had been, checked the hallway, and exhaled like I hadn't taken a breath in hours. That's when I knew I couldn't keep this to myself any longer. So I called the only person I trusted completely. My older brother, Nate. He's ex-military, now working in private security. We've never been that close emotionally, but when it comes to danger, he doesn't ask stupid questions. I told him I needed help, that something was very wrong, and I didn't want to talk about it over the phone. He could hear the panic in my voice, said he'd be on the next flight. He'd be here tomorrow morning. That night, I started doing what I probably should have done days ago, digging through Matt's entire digital footprint. Not just his documents, but the hard drives, old emails, archived folders, even things I thought were junk. And what I found made me feel like I'd stepped into someone else's life entirely. There were receipts for burner phones, travel itineraries that didn't match trips we'd taken together, money transfers, small amounts, scattered, sent to accounts with random names, each labeled with the same 3-letter tag, RLS. I looked it up. Nothing obvious. But then I cross-referenced some of those passenger ID codes from the loyalty list with usernames on old forums, message boards, private chat rooms. And that's where it all began to come into focus. There was a group. Not public. Not searchable. But buried inside this old, decaying corner of the internet was a hidden space where people posted stories about women they were tracking, studying. Some tried to justify it as psychological research. Others were less subtle. They called it the reflection program. And Matt? He'd posted there. At least twice. Same ID code as on his loyalty list. That's when I understood. The photos. The notes. The unsuitables, the disengaged, the resolved. All of it was part of something bigger. He wasn't working alone. He was part of something organized. Hidden. And I was supposed to be next. One of the final entries in his reflection program thread said, "This one's different. I got too close. But I'll finish it. Loyalty demands closure." I read that line 10 times. That wasn't a stranger. That was my husband. Nate arrived the next morning without warning, just a knock on the door at 7:13 a.m., like some kind of guardian angel with combat boots and a scar over his eyebrow. He took one look at me, no makeup, no sleep, eyes hollow, and didn't ask a single question. Just stepped inside and said, "Start from the beginning." I showed him everything. The folder. The list. The messages. The posts from that underground site. I even played the voicemail I'd found late last night, an audio file hidden deep in the phone's archive under a file named white_noise. Wave. It was mostly static. But if you listened closely, right at the 14-second mark, a voice whispered one sentence. "You know what happens when the mirror breaks." I watched Nate's face as he listened. Nothing rattled him, not war, not the sound of threats, but this? This made his eyes narrow like he'd just spotted a sniper. He told me, plainly, that I had 2 options. Option 1, disappear. Pack a bag, go to his place, vanish before Matt ever knew I was gone. Option 2, stay. Gather every shred of proof. Play dumb. Let Matt think he still had control, and wait for the right moment to bring everything crashing down. I didn't hesitate. I chose option 2. Because now I wasn't just scared, I was furious. We made a plan. Nate installed hidden cameras, tiny ones, barely bigger than a shirt button, inside the living room clock, the hallway vent, even behind a picture frame in the office. He also synced my phone with his so he'd have remote access to everything. He told me if Matt so much as breathed wrong, he'd be watching. Then Nate left, said he'd be nearby. Close enough to intervene. Far enough to not draw attention. I spent the rest of the day pretending. Pretending to read. To nap. To cook. When Matt came home, I kissed him on the cheek. We had dinner. Stir fry. He told me about errands. I asked him about work. Nothing in his voice gave him away, but I saw it, the shift. He was testing me. Watching me. Like he could sense the air had changed. After dinner, he offered to do the dishes. Told me to relax. I sat on the couch, heart pounding. And that's when his phone buzzed again. He picked it up, glanced at the screen, and his entire expression changed. Just for a second. His smile faltered. His eyes lost focus. Then he turned away and walked into the hallway. I waited 10 seconds, then quietly followed. He didn't hear me. He was whispering into the phone, barely audible. I know. I'm behind. She's harder than expected. Give me until tomorrow night. I'll finish it. I swear. Finish what? He paused, then added one more thing. No mistakes. Not like the last time. I backed away silently and returned to the couch before he turned around. When he walked back in, his face was calm. Smiling again. He sat beside me like nothing had happened. I leaned my head on his shoulder. And smiled back. But inside? I was done playing pretend. I didn't sleep that night. Again. I just lay there, listening to the steady rhythm of Matt's breathing while my brain replayed that whispered phone call over and over. She's harder than expected, give me until tomorrow night, finish it. Tomorrow night. That meant tonight. I kept waiting for some sign, something obvious that would scream run. But the day was quiet. Too quiet. Matt acted completely normal, but his eyes kept flicking to the clock like he was counting something down. And around 5 p.m., he asked me something that finally made my blood freeze. He said he'd made dinner reservations. At my favorite restaurant. Wanted to celebrate me. No birthday. No anniversary. Just me. I asked why. He shrugged and said, "You've been extra special lately." It was the first time in days I couldn't stop the fear from showing on my face. I looked down, nodded. Told him I was excited. Inside, I was panicking. I excused myself to the bathroom and called Nate. He picked up on the first ring. I whispered everything. The dinner plans. The tone in Nat's voice. The timing. Nate didn't hesitate. Go, he said. Now. But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed proof, the kind I could walk into a police station with. I told him to get to the restaurant early. Watch everything. Record it. I'd stall Matt as long as I could. I put on my nicest dress. Not because I wanted to look good, but because I wanted him to keep thinking I was still blind. At 7:42 p.m., we arrived. The restaurant was dim, expensive, intimate. The kind of place where the silence between clinking forks feels louder than conversation. We were seated near the back, in a booth against the wall. Perfect for privacy. Perfect for concealment. I kept my phone tucked between my thigh and the seat cushion, recording everything. Matt was charming. Effortlessly so. Complimenting my hair, talking about our future, telling me he had a surprise waiting at home. I asked what it was. He smiled and said, "Something you'll never forget." Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black box. My hand started shaking before he even opened it. Inside wasn't jewelry. It was a flash drive. He slid it across the table. Told me it was his gift to me. That it had everything, his truth. And that after dinner, he wanted me to go home, plug it in, and watch. Alone. My heart was thudding against my ribs so loud I thought he could hear it. I looked into his eyes and said, "Okay." Then I excused myself to the restroom. I wasn't going to plug in that drive. I wasn't going home. I slipped out through the side exit, just like Nate had told me to. Met him in the alley where he was already waiting with his car running. I jumped in, slammed the door, and we sped off into the night. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A message from Matt. "Where did you go?" Then another. "Did you watch it yet?" And finally, "I hope you understand this is your fault." Nate turned to me. "You ready to burn this whole thing down?" he asked. I didn't even blink. Hit play. We were parked in a motel lot just off the highway. Nate had a military-grade laptop and a portable firewall running. Whatever was on that flash drive, We weren't letting it touch a single unsecured system. I didn't want to see it, but I had to. Nate inserted the drive. One folder. No password. Inside, a single video file named Reflections_Final. MP4-inch. It started with Matt's face, sitting exactly where I'd seen him record videos before, our shared office, right in front of the bookshelf I'd arranged myself. But this version of him wasn't soft, or sweet, or confused. This version was ice. He looked right into the camera. If you're watching this, it means I was right about you. No greeting. No context, just that. You were always the anomaly. The one who didn't break down. The one who watched back. He smiled. But there was no warmth in it. I've been part of the reflection program for 8 years. Recruited anonymously. Rewarded handsomely. I never asked why they needed us to observe women. Just how to do it better. Most of them never knew. Never suspected. I watched, recorded, reported. Occasionally, participated. He leaned in, his voice lowering. But you? You started snooping earlier than I expected. You broke the rhythm. You looked back. And that's what they warned me about. A pause. Then. They said anomalies like you don't survive long. But I asked them to give me time. To see if I could make you submit. Make you trust me enough to fall, again. He sat back in the chair, exhaled. But you didn't. So now, this is the resolution. Not yours. Mine. The screen flickered. Static for half a second. Then came a new scene. Footage. Of me. Sleeping. Showering. Brushing my teeth. All captured from angles I didn't recognize. Hidden camera angles. My stomach turned. And then came the last clip. It was from 2 days ago. Matt stood in the kitchen, talking to someone off camera. The voice was distorted, masked digitally. But the message was clear. She's ready, Matt said. She trusts me again. Give me tonight. The reply. If she doesn't break by midnight, you know what happens. The screen went black. Then one final line of text. Submission, failed. Resolution, authorized. Nate slammed the laptop shut. I was already crying. Shaking. Rage and horror crashing over me like waves. He didn't just plan to manipulate me. He planned to erase me. We took the flash drive, made 5 copies, and sent them to lawyers, police, and a contact Nate trusted in federal law enforcement. We handed everything over. It wasn't just about me anymore, it was about every woman on that list. Every one he'd labeled resolved. That was 3 weeks ago. Matt's gone. He never came home. Never messaged again. His phone was found abandoned in a bus station an hour away. His car left near a ravine. No sign of him. Authorities say he ran. I think they made him disappear. As for me? I'm living somewhere new. Somewhere quiet. Different name. Different city. Nate made sure of that. But sometimes, I still wake up in the middle of the night, staring into the dark, wondering how long Matt was pretending to be a husband. And how close I came to becoming just another folder on a forgotten drive. Resolved.